Merry Christmas, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two Who's Review. I'm Alex.
And I'm Saint Nick. Nope, just kidding. I'm
Very
Fitz.
nice. And today we will be looking at the most recent episode of the show, the 2023 Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road. It's the first Christmas special in 6 years, and the first full episode featuring Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor and Millie Gibson as new companion Ruby Sunday.
Mm.
Now, this has a lot to do. It's got to give us our first proper look at the 15th Doctor. It's
Mm-hmm.
got to introduce us to a new companion. And it's got to basically ingratiate us to them as quick as possible, make us like them, make us understand them, and make us figure out what's going on in their little heads. And in those respects, mission accomplished. I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good too. There may be like a couple of things that I want, uh, maybe not greater clarity, but more exploration in. But we'll get into that. But
Yeah,
generally speaking, yeah, this was a really strong episode.
yeah, definitely.
A a really good chance to the combination of both performances and the writing
Mm.
you know sort of wind up being used to spectacular effect. um the the actors, in particular Millie Gibson and Ncuti Gatwa, they're really um the writing gives them a lot of space to, I think, show quite a lot of nuance in those characters, which is really, really great for Ncuti Gatwa in particular. I thought
Yeah.
all the all sort of the great things that I liked about his performance in The Giggle get expanded on here, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, I'll throw this out there, and I might be proven wrong on this, but I can't remember a first episode of a Doctor Companion pairing where the two actors instantly had this much chemistry. Like
Yeah.
they are clicking with each other basically immediately. I think that maybe in the Snowmen, Jenna Coleman and Matt Smith, they had a similar kind of bouncing off each other style, but
Mhm.
that episode was bad, so that doesn't count. Um, but more often
So
than
I'll
not,
take
it
your
sort of
word for it.
takes sure. It usually takes the pairing about like an episode or two to really like
Hmm.
find their like sort of what their dynamic is and like how they're gonna best sort of interact with each other. And here
Yeah.
they've got it at the gate basically. I really enjoy seeing them act alongside each other.
Yeah, I mean, I am tempted to agree with you there. I think because if we just compare it to even Rose, for example, most of that
Mm,
episode is Rose being kind of unnerved, but also sort of intrigued by the Doctor. But here, the relationship gets established much more
yeah.
quickly.
Mm,
Now, maybe that's because the Doctor had met Ruby a couple of times before they like really met in the
well,
scene
yeah.
when she's climbing up the ladder. But even there, it even in those scenes, it still felt quite concrete.
Mm,
And even by the mere fact that sort of RTD is laying the groundwork and doing it pretty succinctly, it must be said, um, means that their actual, their first real meeting um, has that chemistry you want between these two characters. So
mm.
yeah, I mean, maybe in following years we may be proven wrong, but yeah, I'm tempted to agree with you on that.
Yeah, and I think that's where the strength of the episode is because I think the one thing that a lot of
Mm,
people have been pointing out online is that the plot is anywhere between weak or like not as strong as it could have been.
yeah,
And while I would
yeah,
agree, I would also argue that's kind of the point because this is doing the same thing that quite a lot of first companion slash Doctor episodes do, where the plot will be somewhat basic so that it doesn't outshine the character
yeah,
of
for
it
sure.
all. and this is definitely a very character-driven and character-based episode. There are
Yeah.
quite a lot of scenes where the plot takes a complete backseat, and we just get to stay with the characters for a little bit, learn about them. And I think that's to not just the, if not the betterment of the episode, it's going to be working for the betterment of the next season to come. This
Yeah.
episode does quite a lot of groundwork
Yeah.
teaching us about these characters so that we don't have to do so much of that when the next season begins and we can just go straight into bombastic timey-wimey adventures. I'm all
Yeah.
for that, and while I know that for some people it might not be their cup of tea and they might prefer a stronger narrative or a more present narrative, for me, I don't mind that as much.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, yeah, there are some things in the plot, and we'll get into it, obviously,
Yeah.
that did leave me scratching my head a little bit.
Mhm.
But I wasn't. It didn't really hurt the story for me. I certainly didn't feel, unsatisfied in those moments where we're able to sort of pull back and sort of really sort of be with these characters.
Yeah.
They are really, really spectacular. As you say, this is a very character-driven piece, and
Yeah, well,
I
also
think,
even sorry to interrupt, but even just
yeah,
to compare this episode to Rose again, Rose is the very definition of a standard invasion story, and I wouldn't
yeah,
argue that this is like there's quite a bit more going on in this than I think many people are giving it credit for. It's not the strongest narrative of all time, but it's not just an invasion, you know,
yeah. No,
like
it's it's
something
it's
a
a little
little
different.
different, and there is a third act twist which I really enjoy.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, it's not standard, but I do get where people are coming from. Where it's like it's not the best. It's a little weak in moments. There are a couple of things that don't quite make sense, but overall, fine, and it serves its purpose.
yeah, yeah. I'd agree. I think the as you say, the way the plot is constructed, it in a way maybe it is slightly too experimental for its own good because not everything is quite coming together, but
Mm.
it's still certainly admirable and really enjoyable to see, some departures with typical Doctor Who narratives,
Yeah,
especially as you say that Rose, the story is a very typical invasion story from Doctor Who. I think the one thing that surprised me a little bit, although it didn't wind up being a problem,
mm.
I was surprised sort of how little focus the villains got in
Yeah,
this. Because a lot of, maybe not, certainly not all of it, but a lot of Doctor Who, there's sort of chunks devoted to confronting the villain and
yeah,
maybe getting some backstory, some motivation. And this goes back to the classic series. Um, but here there isn't a lot of
no,
that,
there really isn't. Yeah,
and most of like our understanding of the goblins is mainly given to us through the Doctor's explanation. With that said, if you compare it to Rose, there you don't see a lot of the nesting consciousness or the Autons that much. They're just kind of there to sort of invade and be the scary villain. So that in a way makes sense. And as you say, even if I momentarily wanted a bit more about the goblins and maybe their backstory and stuff, I'm completely comfortable for it, taking a back seat because we get a lot of really nice characterizations throughout this episode. So yeah.
yeah, and before we jump into the timescales,
Mm.
I don't always do this, but we have been getting on our newer episodes have been getting more viewers than we're used to,
Mm.
primarily because we're pushing these out to sort of get them out as early as possible to catch the algorithm. Um, but I just want to clarify because we may have some new viewers who haven't heard us give this disclaimer before. You're allowed to disagree with us.
Mm.
It's completely fine. As with all media analysis, everyone forms their own opinion, and that's okay. As long as you're civil about it in the comments section, then that's okay. Feel free to tell us that you disagree with us, but don't tell us that we're wrong because in the end of the day, I can't be wrong about my own opinion. Unless I'm acting in bad faith or with
Mm.
misinformation. An opinion that I come to, if I say I like this, you can't say no, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So just bear that in mind,
Mm.
everyone, and then
Mm.
we'll all be able to have a lovely old time in the comments section, whether or not it's in agreement or disagreement. And like I said, as long as we remain civil about it all, then everyone will walk away completely fine, and no one will go away huffy.
Mm.
But with that being said, if we jump over to the timescales, out of 51 votes, this episode has an average rating of 7.6.
Yeah, I think that's generally fair. Maybe I might put it a little higher, but it makes sense that that's the general consensus, I think.
Yeah, I agree. No one has put this so far on the timescales below a 5, which
Nice.
makes sense again. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's about as low as I would dare to put it if someone was willing to argue me that low.
Yeah.
I did see a couple of people on Facebook, of course it was Facebook, in the comments of some link, I think it was one of those clickbaity things where they were talking about the musical numbers, and they were trying to like rise up a conversation about it. There were people who were going, "Oh, I knew it. It's just the show is just as bad now as it was on the Chibnall."
What?
Well, yeah, I know. People, for some reason, have this insane opinion of, based on the last 4 episodes, that the show hasn't improved since Chris Chibnall was the showrunner, which is just objectively
sure.
wrong.
What? No, come on.
The
Yeah,
Doctor's confident again. The Doctor is now in character again for the first time in ages.
and can we also, just speaking about the music and the musical number, it's like, are you seriously trying to tell me that we're worse off now than we were in the Chibnall era when Murray Gold wasn't scoring it? What are you talking about?
Oh yeah.
Actually, I like the musical numbers. We'll get into it in more detail, but I found them very enjoyable. The Goblin song is catchy and weird, and it's
I purposefully didn't listen to the Goblin song when it was uploaded to YouTube a couple of weeks ago because I wanted to go into it surprised, and I was certainly surprised. Like, I couldn't have predicted that it was a song about eating a baby. I just thought it was going to be like we're goblins and sneaky. We're gonna play tricks on you, hee hee hee. But no, it was an eating children song, so that was a surprise.
It was something else.
Yeah. Out of our 15th Doctor story, this is the highest rated 15th Doctor story so far.
Wow.
It's shocking, I know. But... well, actually, that's not quite fair, because The Giggle is also listed as a 15th Doctor story, which it kind of is. But those stories currently have the exact same ranking on the timescale. So, for all intents and purposes, this episode currently has a 7 for plot.
Again, yeah, I mean, that seems about right to me. Like, the episode, I enjoyed it more than, a 7, but the plot itself, I don't know if I'd describe it as, like, genuinely weak, but it's not one of the strongest elements in the whole thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it much higher than a 7, if not just because I do think that the third act twist, it genuinely surprised me, and it was, like, there were some stakes there, even though I knew everything was going to be fine because it's Doctor Who. But, like, the fact that it did that to me and it made me genuinely, like, scared was like, okay, it's done its job. It's good.
Yeah.
It's at the very least
for sure.
good. It has an 8.5 for acting. Yep, there's no... I can't think of any poor performances in this.
No, I can't think of a weak link in the whole thing.
Maybe Davina McCall, because she's mainly a presenter and not an actor, but who cares?
Yeah, but it works. She's doing what she's doing well when she's... when she's presenting the show, it feels very authentic. I'd completely forgotten, by the way, that Davina McCall was a real person, and had also been on Doctor Who previously.
Yes, indeed. She voiced the big
Davina
brother,
droid.
The Davina droid in the
that's funny. That is funny.
So she's arguably played herself twice.
Oh god, yeah.
It has an 8.5 for effects. I agree. I don't think there were certain moments that weren't like perfect, but nothing stood out to me as overly bad. So
yeah, I thought maybe the goblins didn't look as... in some of the close-ups didn't look as 100% authentic as they could have.
No, I agree.
It wasn't a huge problem, and a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I thought the Goblin King actually looked really good. Like,
I think that's mostly done with practical effects, and it works to its benefit. And it's also good to see that Doctor Who carrying on its tradition of practical effects, because most of these things, I think, well, no, maybe not most, but a lot of them are practical effects, and they really work. I really enjoyed the design of the Goblin ship and the interior of it. It was quite exciting.
Yeah, it was a really unique design. I quite enjoyed that aspect
Mm,
of it.
yeah,
Um, it has a 7.8 for replay. I dare say that value will keep going up as future episodes address the purposefully tangled threads that this episode leaves behind.
yeah, I agree. I think it got a little bit better for me because I've watched it, yeah, 3 times since it
Wow.
premiered, um, and it did get a little bit better for me, as the more I viewed it. So that's really cool.
hmm and currently, 3 out of 49 people say this requires a previous story. I dare say this is a pretty good episode to watch if it's your first time. Like, there are a couple of things
Yeah.
that it doesn't explain all that well, like in terms of what you need to know
Mm.
about the show, and you would be confused by the gravity of the situation.
Yeah,
But
and we're going to address that later on.
yep, but overall, I do think that this is a very strong first episode in that it doesn't rely too heavily on stuff from the past. When it does, it's just in reference to things that you could just see as like enigmatic, mysterious things about the Doctor. Like they reference Timeless Child once, and it's just there to like, you know, allude to the Doctor's past and again tie another coincidence into the narrative, which we'll come to
And
in
also
a
to
little
help
bit.
establish connections with character, I think, too.
Exactly, yeah.
It's certainly not, annoying or it's not hitting the audience in the face with canon destroying weirdness. So
Yeah, no,
it's
I still think the best episode to start with is Rose because I just think that does a better job
yeah,
of reintroducing the show. But I don't think people would be overly lost if this was their first Doctor Who experience.
yeah, yeah. No, I'd agree. I don't think that it doesn't really hinder
No,
the experience of being a first time viewer. As you say, maybe Rose is a little bit stronger, but
well,
what
I
this
think it's
episode
just
is trying to do, it works pretty well, I think.
yeah, and I think that's largely just because Rose puts a massive emphasis on asking the question, "Who is this person?"
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's get into it. I want to start with Ruby,
Mhm,
because she is arguably the focal point of this story.
mhm.
Um, a huge emphasis is placed on her backstory right at the start. We learn so much about her. Um, I've seen people saying that RTD is treading old ground with this character, and especially comparing her to Rose, being like it's another blonde 19-year-old girl. She's doesn't live. She's like not exactly a broken home in this situation, but it's not a traditional home life. She's
Mm.
and I like that's legitimately where I think the comparisons end because I can't figure out any others. Because and I do think
Yeah,
that people are sort of just taking like looking at just like this what's it called the on the surface traits of the
yeah,
character and extrapolating from there because in my mind it's light and day. Ruby and Rose are very very different characters, and for me it comes down to their attitudes. I always found Rose to be kind of a pessimistic character, like especially when she's first introduced, she has like very little ambition, and and that translated into like a form of cynicism where she would be like, oh, so this is the rest of my life, is it? I'm just going to serve chips or whatever it was. And I'm not even using that as a way to bash Rose again, because I'm not. I'm just pointing out that that's the character. Whereas Ruby, I found to be a very optimistic and upbeat character. It's the classic example of one of those people that happen you see all the time in real life, where it's like life's dealt them a bad hand, and they're not choosing to use that as an excuse to, uh, you know, be a downer or lash out or take it out on everyone else. They're it's like that kind of thing where it's like they're an upbeat and peppy and an optimistic person despite everything they've been through. And that kind of person with that strength of character is exactly the kind of person that fits the TARDIS, I think.
yeah. No, I'd agree. I think that, as you say, maybe in terms of some setup, there are some surface level
Well,
similarities,
yes.
but they don't run deep,
No.
at all, really. And I think, as you say, Ruby's character is quite different to Rose. she's more inquisitive, more hopeful. Yeah, I think you can sort of see that when she finds out from Davina McCall that they couldn't find any details of her parents. Now, like the fact that she's upset about that makes sense, but there was obviously a really strong sense of hope there, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that is in a bit of contrast to the way Rose is portrayed.
Yeah.
And as you say, I think it would, like, as a companion, that sort of attitude is going to be very helpful.
And also, like,
In
she has a
future.
very clearly demonstrated thrill-seeking side, or maybe not thrill-seeking, but like adventurous. Like,
Yeah.
especially when she starts dangling off the rope, especially with the assistance of the glove. Like,
Mm.
she's initially scared, as you would be, but as soon as like she finds out that, oh no, it's safe, she then just starts enjoying it. And
Yeah.
again, like, perfect. I think that's like almost like the perfect cross section between like how most people would react
Mm.
and how Clara started to react towards the end of her run, where she became completely thrill seeking to her own detriment, and people were like, "This is a bit much," including
Mm.
in universe. I think this is the exact right point between those two things. And again, I just think that like a huge chunk of this episode is just setting up why Ruby is going to be a really good companion in the future. Granted, she doesn't do much in the story itself. Um, like
Yeah.
in terms of resolving the conflicts, a lot of that comes down to the Doctor, and I do think there's a reason for that. I think again we want to give this new Doctor a bit of attention as well. Ruby's going to
Yeah.
have
For
plenty of
sure.
chances in future episodes to prove her worth, to sort of demonstrate what she brings to the table. So I'm
Yeah.
not really that fussed about Ruby not doing a lot to resolve the conflict here, primarily because, again, it's a First Doctor story, and especially in the third act, it would be hard for her to resolve the conflict while a literal baby she be.
Yeah. For sure. And I think like there seems to me to be almost a slight disconnect between her journey as a character and a lot of the other elements of the plot. So,
Hmm?
for example, the scene when she tells Carla that they couldn't find any details about her parents, and Carla comforts her. Um, that is a really lovely scene. It's
It is, yeah.
very sentimental. It's just really beautiful. I think it's
Mm,
really hits the right tone, which is very important for those crucial scenes. And I actually
mm.
appreciated that scene more after watching it, twice and three times. It's something I hadn't noticed quite as much the first time. But I also realize that doesn't seem to be connected to the rest of the plot, especially it doesn't seem to be connected to the Doctor. Like I thought, could there have been some sort of way to link the Doctor's presence and that crucial development in uh, Ruby's character? I
Sure.
think it because that moment it's really important. I think of Ruby sort of realizing that no, of course she has a family. She doesn't, even if she doesn't know who her biological parents are. That doesn't matter because there are people around her who love her, which is great. But it seems to me that would have happened with or without the Doctor, and I just thought, is there a way to meld them together a little bit more?
Sure.
Um,
There's another thing I think that scene does, and I will come back to Ruby's on-screen family a bit later on because I do want to talk
mm,
about them a bit more. Um,
sure.
but I think that scene is also there. Uh, it's another scene that the episode has in sort of building up what a good person Carla is, and
Mm,
that's all for the absolute gut punch of the scene
mm,
when Ruby is erased from their timeline, and we see like the complete 180 of Carla without Ruby.
yeah,
That like devastating scene, like that was
yeah,
really really difficult to watch in a good way, and like
mm,
I was initially like, okay, why is the Doctor like shedding so many tears here? But it's because he's seen like this really amazing, strong, positive woman become just the complete opposite, a cynical, like, money grubbing monster. And it
mm,
breaks his heart. Like
mm,
it's really, really effective storytelling. And I don't think you get that without the combination of scenes beforehand where we see her being, you know, uh comforting and well spoken and altruistic and
Mm,
loving and all these other things. If you're going to have the contrast later on, you need to really build up the image that we have of her in the first
for
place.
sure,
Otherwise,
for
it's
sure.
not that big a change.
Yeah, it's yeah, as you say, just that it's a careful piece of character development that
Mm.
needs to be handled really well, and I think you know, in order to sort of to get us to that emotional gut punch, it the characterization is working very well. I
Yeah,
think.
definitely.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I also just like that. Like, I appreciate that they didn't like highlight a moment in their past where they were like, and this is the conversation that Ruby and Carla had that convinced Carla to like, start becoming a serial foster mother.
Hmm.
Like, no, it was just like the influence of having Ruby around and her being a really good daughter and helping to, and sort of slowly over the years kind of like influencing different sides of Carla's behavior, because that is like genuinely how human interaction, especially prolonged human interaction,
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, for sure. They're showing without telling in that sense, and they do
Yeah,
that in
exactly.
a number of specific places, especially with the relationship between Carla and Ruby. There's that scene where after Ruby's had the interview and they're talking about how maybe possibly finding her biological parents, and Carla just sort of starts to break down a little bit and then says I wanted to tell them you were so small, and I love that line because it's such a again, like we know what she's saying there, right?
Yes,
We
yeah.
know, but they're not saying it, which
Yeah,
is really great. It's
they're not saying don't forget about me, or
yeah,
like.
it's just a nice little bit of really nuanced and quite subtle
Mm.
dialogue. Um, you know, I think because Doctor Who, I think certainly not in every case, but in some cases, it could be accused of not being a hugely subtle show. Um,
Especially in
for
the last 5 years.
yeah, for sure. But and maybe I am just sort of comparing it as a point of contrast to the last 5 years. But it's just really nice to have really good and subtle pieces of character development with dialogue that really just you know that is subtle and that hammers it home. It's just
Yeah.
it's great to have good writing again. Oh
Yeah, I know, right?
oh
I
god,
also really like Cherry as a character. Like, she's just funny, and she's a really nice energy to have in that flat.
yeah, I'd agree. Um,
I
she's a
do
good yeah, good
I do wonder if this is going to be a situation where, because we've had a lot of different companion families in the past, especially RTD loved to shine a light on the families of the companions. Moffat kind of did, but didn't really commit. And then with Chibnall, it was like a sort of a mix of both, where it was like some of the families had a massive focus, some of them really didn't. I do wonder what side this is going to fall on, like whether or not these are going to be like one-off characters who maybe pop up once in a while when Ruby has to go home, or if we are going to do like quite a lot with them and really flesh them out a little bit more as we go along with the season. I'd be okay with seeing more of them. I quite like them.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. I think I don't know. I could see it working either way. Like even if
Yeah,
they don't get a huge focus as the story goes on, it like the stories themselves will still work quite well. And that's partly because there is such a strong foundation of characterization here, so that even if the next season is very sort of Ruby centric, we know that a lot of I think of what she's going to be doing is derived from her family experience, which is
yeah,
really great because it is so sort of potently executed here.
yes.
But having said that, it is RTD. I'm really not sure what he'll do over the next season. It is entirely possible that these characters will show up again, and I would enjoy seeing them again.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, we basically know at this point that Mrs. Flood is going to show up again, and that's a
Hmm.
whole other
Well,
thing.
well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because like
Hmm.
as soon as I saw that little tag at the end where Mrs. Flood looks directly into the camera and says, "You never seen a TARDIS before," I did have the thought of who is this? But then I had
Yeah.
another thought, and it's not a thought I've seen online. And that thought was essentially, is this a one-off character that we'll never see again, who got to be a little whimsical because it's a Christmas special?
I don't think so.
You
That
don't.
doesn't. No, it doesn't. I know what you mean. I can
Hmm.
see sort of your thought process there because if you're going to do that, yeah, it's going to be in a Christmas special.
Just well,
And
also my thoughts are my main thought anyway is um. So you have seen a TARDIS before. So were you being so mean to poor Abdul when you thought he'd parked it in the sidewalk himself and not and refused to move it? You know, like those are
yeah, that.
two diametrically opposed
Mm,
uh, thoughts to have, and especially with a lot of the theories I've seen being like, oh, it's what theories have I seen? I've seen it's it's Ruby's actual mother. It's Ruby in the future. I've seen that theory. I've seen one theory that it's Jackie Tyler, which is bizarre. Um, there's of course the theory that she's the Rani. Um, in all of these situations, I'm just thinking, well, those characters would behave one of those ways, where she would either encourage Ruby to get in the TARDIS or yell at Abdul. But none of those characters would do both of those things.
yeah, I think it's more likely like if this character comes back again, it will be a new
Hmm.
character. Yeah, I mean, there's that reference where she says, I haven't seen a police call box in about 50 years, and I did think, oh, is that going to imply that she met maybe the third or fourth Doctor 50 years ago? But it's kind of hard to tell. But I feel like it's one of those things where it like even breaking the fourth wall in that sense, that is quite a risk to take. Like even for
Hmm.
Doctor Who, that's quite strange. And as you say, like if you're going to get away with that in any episode, it's going to be a Christmas special. But I feel
Yeah.
like we will see her again, like that.
Well, we'll see.
Knowing RTD and the way he writes this show, it seems unlikely that he'd just put a character like that and to so boldly speak to the audience, staring at the camera and just have it be as a one-off haha funny moment.
Oh, I almost want to make a bet with you over this because I don't think she will be back. I think there's quite a lot that's already been set up for future episodes. And if Mrs. Flood is one as well, I'm just like, well, her motivations are all over the place. Her actions are diametrically opposed.
Mm.
And I think it's a bit messy. But if it works, it works. But I honestly think that she won't be back.
All right. I'll take you up on that. I will think she'll be back. I think
Okay.
if RTD can bring back, the Doctor's severed hand like 2 seasons after it first showed up.
Ooh.
Oh no, a season basically. No, 2 seasons, 1 season.
It was really important 2 seasons after, but it was
Yeah,
first brought back a season after.
yeah. Um. So either way, yeah, if RTD can do
Ah,
that with that small detail, again, having a character speak directly to camera, I have to believe that this woman's going to come back at some point.
what's
It, it
what's the wager?
um a
We'll
hundred
figure it.
points, shall we say?
If it's a point system or something else, or actually, yeah. Why don't we just? I assume that when a proper Series 14 trailer comes out, we'll do our like thoughts and predictions.
Mm,
Do you want to have that as like a little coin toss thing, being like the Mrs. Flood separate from any of our predictions, but whoever's right, bonus 500 points.
sure, yeah, why not?
All right, done.
Yeah, nice. The digital
Cool.
handshake is
Yep.
done. Cool.
Complete. Contract signed.
Indeed.
Um, the Doctor. This is a really great
Yeah,
episode for the Doctor.
yeah. I I think there was a point where I was surprised how because it's definitely not a Doctor Light story, but I
No.
thought, do I want to see more of the Doctor in this episode? I compare it to in particular Rose in that one moment where the Doctor's holding Rose's hand and when he's feeling the motion of the earth under his feet. There isn't quite a scene like that, but in a way there doesn't have to be, because
No.
apart from the specials, we've just spent the last, years reeling from the biggest reveal of backstory that the show's ever attempted to do.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need any more of that at the
I just
moment.
I just enjoy having a confident Doctor again.
Oh, for
Because
sure.
if there's one thing, because like say what you will about Jodie Whittaker's performance, it's good for what it
Mm.
is, for the role that she was given. But 13 is the least confident Doctor out of all of them.
Yeah,
And
for
it
sure.
makes zero sense considering that at that point she was the most experienced Doctor as well.
Yeah. I mean, like,
So
the fact that she says in The Haunting of Via Diodati, yeah, with me and my companions, it's not a flat structure, I'm at the summit. That's She says that like
the only
once
time, yeah.
through the whole series. The fact that she even says, no, it's a flat structure. Is just anyway. The point is, as you say, yeah, she was quite, the
Hmm.
way she was written was quite unsure. But here we do have that wonderful combination of the writing, but also
Yes.
Ncuti Gatwa's really, really wonderful performance.
Hmm.
And the fact that both the writing and the performance are sort of able to play off each other, which is really
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's also quite good to see the eccentric side of the Doctor come out again because it's been a while.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, 11 was eccentric, but maybe not in the ways that, especially you might have wanted him to be.
Yep,
Um,
that's true.
7 is a bit of an eccentric Doctor. 6 is an eccentric Doctor. I'd even call 3 and 2 eccentric Doctors as well. And 4 had they've all had moments of eccentricity, but I
Oh,
wouldn't say.
four was pretty wacky. Four
Well,
was
yeah,
like, I mean, I think I referenced this, but I think Stephen Moffat actually said that when you look at Tom Baker's performance, you almost feel unnerved by it because he's really very strange in that role. But
yeah, I would dare say
yeah,
that Judy is doing a really good job so far, combining two things that rarely combine well in Doctor Who,
mm,
and that's the eccentricity combined with the suave.
yeah, yeah. I see what you mean.
You know, like
Yeah,
he's playing it like a he's almost playing it like a leading man in an action movie, but like from an alternate universe where everyone's a bit weird.
yeah. There is, as you say, a lot of confidence in that performance.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost tempted to say that when I watch it, it almost feels like he's been playing the Doctor for, quite a while, actually.
Mm.
Um, and that's really great. I think it shows a very sort of keen understanding of who this character is and how they
Yeah,
work.
well, that's another
Um,
thing as well. Like I've made reference in the past to the fact that oftentimes with the first episode of a new Doctor, the kind of Doctor that they are by the end of their era is very different than who they started as. I mean,
mm,
we've seen it recently when examining the 10th Doctor and how at the end of the Christmas Invasion he has the no second chances line, which is very,
mm,
very different than how that Doctor is characterized later in his run.
yeah,
11 is the same, 12 is the same,
mm,
13 is kind of the same the whole way through, but that's only because they never decided to grow that character.
yeah, yeah,
But so it'll be interesting to see if this. I mean, if this is the interpretation of the Doctor we get all the way through, I won't be upset. I would like to see
mm,
this character go through some hardships because that's how any Doctor is tested.
yeah,
And it's also good to know, like, because this is the Doctor that's been through the self healing that 14 is currently having. But it's great to see that those things that he's gone through, those traumatic things, are still affecting him. They're just not inhibiting him because
yeah,
he's still
mm,
like when he references being abandoned and not knowing where he came from.
mm,
He doesn't say it flippantly. He doesn't like throw it away as like a a one-off comment. He's still like clearly like these things that have happened to me like I've clearly they're not like on his mind all the time and they're not
mm.
affecting him to the extent that he's like he needs help. But just like with most forms of therapy, he's still living with them.
For sure. They're as you say, they're not lingering. He's not he's
Yeah,
not having any sort of moments of brooding away in the TARDIS, wandering around the TARDIS console, having an existential
yeah,
crisis
yeah,
like some other doctors have. But sort of that trauma and the that space for growth is still there. There's the one line which I've got written down here where he says to Ruby, "I've got no one," and then immediately says, "Make sure the oven's off." Yeah, like there's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wonderful sort of contrast where you feel the tension, and that tension is even underscored by the fact that he then says, "Make sure the oven's off." It
Mm.
almost feels like a rationalization, but there's still the sign that this Doctor is a bit different to previous ones, which is really quite great.
Yeah, because you can tell when he says that, it's not like he's saying that to cover up his trauma or like quickly move on. He just says it like it's a part of him, and then goes, "Oh, remember the oven," and then runs away. Like that's perfect.
Yeah, it's
That's
like
the
it's a
kind of characterization I would expect
yeah.
a therapized doctor to have. It's great.
Like he's acknowledging that it is part of his, to an extent, part of his identity and definitely part of his lived experience. But he's also expressing that there's, it can't be the whole truth. There's more than that. He's not
Yeah.
letting it define him.
Hmm.
And I think there are, other moments, maybe, not all the time, but specific moments where previous doctors would sort of let it define them. They would kind of get consumed with
Easily.
the horror of
Yeah.
some of their experiences. So it's good to see that sort of progress, I
Hmm.
think, which is really
Um,
great.
the new screwdriver is gonna have to grow on me. I'm not thrilled by its
I,
design.
I'm okay with it. I understand what you mean. It is very different.
Yeah.
It looks more like a compass than anything.
So many people have compared it to the remote from Click, which yes, it does look like a remote more than a screwdriver. I think it's gonna be one of those things where it's like every time I see it, I'm just gonna go, okay, I'm a little more used to it now. It's not something that ruins any aspect of the show for me. Because like
Yeah.
if you're gonna look at that and say that's clearly not a screwdriver, then
Mm.
you're gonna have to say that about literally every sonic screwdriver design that's ever existed in the show's run.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Have you seen what the original sonic screwdriver looked like?
once or twice.
It's literally a pen light,
Yeah, yeah,
which you know, that's just funny. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean the fact that it's changed so much, I understand why you may be a little bit hesitant on it, but
Mhm.
I quite enjoy the design. I like that they're doing something a little bit different, and it may prove to be quite a important thing in upcoming seasons, even more so than most sonic screwdrivers. So I think it may just come down to the way it's utilized more than anything
Maybe,
else.
yeah. We'll see.
So, yeah, we'll see how
Like
that
it's
goes.
just like an incredibly incidental detail. Like I said, it's not anything
Yeah,
that
yeah. It doesn't ruin it, for
it
sure.
didn't it didn't even knock the episode down like a point five of a point to me. Like that's how
No,
little
God
it
no, God no.
registered.
Yeah, and the whole,
Um,
even the whole bit where like the doctor says, "Yeah, this thing could find diamonds," and he has that nice little conversation with the police officer. That's really great. It's helping.
yeah, I almost
It's
forgot about
incorporating it into the characterization, which
that
is
to
kind of
me
great.
was the moment when 15 like really properly clicked. Like that conversation he
Yeah.
has with the police officer.
Oh,
It was
for
just
for sure.
it was just the perfect showcasing of the yeah, the ingenuity, the perceptiveness and the empathy of the character. All three aspects of the character perfectly encapsulated in that one conversation. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. I really like that scene. As you say, it really sort of that's kind of like the big scene that makes me feel like, oh, okay, this is, the doctor, he's here and he's doing all the great stuff because he's got, as you say, the engineer, no, the ingenuity, but there's also that great bit of deductive reasoning that we've come to
Mhm.
expect from the Doctor, which is really
Yeah.
wonderful, and all of it underscored by that sense of compassion, which is critical to any, um, any sort of writing and performance for the Doctor, which is really great. And I
Hmm.
will say that one of the things I love about both the writing, but especially Ncuti Gatwa's performance, is that he manages to like he this may sound kind of simplistic, but he just feels like the Doctor. You know what I
Oh
mean? Like
yeah.
I look at there are just so many moments, and they're really subtle ones. Just a look he has in his eye, or a even the
Hmm.
more stoic moments where he's just sort of staring off into the distance, or when he's crying when he finds out what happens to all the other children, um, and even just small bits when he's laughing and having a good time. That all feels like the Doctor. That's such
Yeah,
a
and I forget the exact moment it happened, but when he like sees something new or scary and just goes, "Oh, that's brilliant."
oh yeah, no, that's with the Goblin song, I think, where at least I think, where they're crawling around to the Goblin ship, and I think he says, "Oh, that's amazing," and then Ruby's like, "No, it's not,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that also kind of fits in to sort of who the Doctor is. Um,
Yep.
so I think that's all really wonderful. But the other remarkable thing about his performance is he makes it entirely his own,
Oh,
which is what
yes.
you want in any great Doctor performance.
Absolutely.
Um, it's that combination of understanding who this character is and how they've been done previously, but also the unique spin. That's the joy of regeneration. It's an
Yes.
old format with new presentation, essentially.
Definitely.
Um,
I'm so excited to see where this goes. I'm
yeah,
thrilled that we have a doctor like this again.
yeah, he's really wonderful, and I think I mentioned even last year when we talked about all the updates.
Hmm.
Um, I said that I'm only familiar with Ncuti Gatwa's work from Sex Education, but
Me too.
if you look at his performance as Eric F. Young, there are like even in that performance, there's the makings of a good Doctor performance, and I've been proven right on every count with
Mm.
what I've seen so far. Like all the fact that he can combine this sort of the whimsy, the joie de vivre, curiosity, but also the deep sense of moral seriousness. I detected that in Sex Education, and it's completely true here. And I'm really, really happy that I get to say that because,
Yeah.
yeah, like like
Uh,
having that good performance, it's critical. Um,
yeah.
for this show, and I know that's kind of obvious to say because it's Doctor Who, it's about the Doctor, but I don't think people sort of always appreciate how important that strong performance is.
Mm.
Um, so it's
Well,
really great that we've got that.
the strong performance is more than half the reason why Peter Capaldi's Doctor works so well.
Mm.
Because
Oh,
I think I've said
for
it before,
sure.
but even in scripts that he doesn't get a lot to do on page, he brings so much to the role in his performance alone, and just it's incredible.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I don't know if I've said on the podcast, but I'm sure I've said to you at least privately that even in some of the episodes, um, in the Capaldi era that I didn't like because some of Moffat's concerns were coming in there and just kind of frustrating me a little bit. Even in those scripts, he really knew how to draw out all those important nuances to the point where his performance alone almost saved those moments for me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. But it's good to see, as I say, just that strong, confident performance from Ncuti Gatwa, especially given that this is a First Doctor story, and it also must be said he's not going through the typical, post-regeneration madness, but that kind of works to its benefit because the
Mm, mm.
performance is so strong that we don't need any sort of weird, super wacky twisting character. This is just the Doctor, so it just kind of
Yeah, yeah,
works.
definitely.
Hmm.
Let's talk about the goblins and what
Yeah.
they're up to. Um, so we've there's a. I'll do the positives at the start. I
Sure.
really like the idea of the language of coincidence that is built around the goblins and
Hmm.
baking that into them as a species because I think that fits so well with not just what they do with it in the episode, but also the traditional characterization of goblins as uh, whimsical tricksters for
Yeah.
evil. And
Yeah.
in fact, it
I'd agree.
really goes hand in hand. The whole creating coincidence in order to power themselves up, combined with how they've often been portrayed in other media, it fits absolutely
Hmm.
perfectly, and it's that little extra layer that takes it over from a pure fantasy element to being just that little bit of science fiction on top of it that makes it fit in Doctor Who more than I thought
Hmm.
it would. That's great.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. I find the scientific concepts that are introduced in this story to be interesting, but totally in line with Doctor Who as a show
Yes,
generally. So we've got
definitely.
obviously the use of coincidence that the goblins utilize.
Mhm.
But we've also got, the weird technology founded on knots instead
Yeah, the
of,
rope science.
yeah, which is really interesting and really effective.
Mm.
The reason why I think it works is because both of these concepts, they remind me of episodes like the Shakespeare Code and Blink. So there's obviously a precedent for this sort of thing.
Yeah,
And
definitely. And people who've been saying normally when they introduce a fantasy or mythical element, they go, "Well, it looks like a vampire, but actually it's a fish alien." And people have
yeah,
gone, "Well, the fact they didn't do that with the goblins just doesn't make it sit right." But I disagree. I think, as with a lot of things like this, it's very understandable to imagine that a few stray goblins were seen by people and then worked their way into like our mythology as like, oh, there are goblin creatures who scurry around and get
yeah,
up to miss. It just fits. I don't know what to tell you. It
yeah.
works
I
for me.
no, I'd agree. And I mean, the fact is, the Doctor literally says that it is a form of science when Ruby sort of says, "Oh no, it's magic." No,
Yes.
it's still science fiction, right? We're not
Yeah.
abandoning that. And even if this is
No.
in the tradition of tradition, in the line of thought that RTD has expressed, where he, wants to explore more uh, fantasy elements, it's still being grounded in scientific realism, and that's the point.
Yes.
That's what Doctor Who is, I think, founded on. So, as I say, there is obviously a precedent for this, and it is being executed in a really interesting and new way.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't understand the criticisms in
No.
that area.
I
I
mean,
think it works.
if it's personally something you just don't prefer to when they try and explain it away some other way, that's fine.
Hmm.
But I just think for us it was like not a problem at all.
No,
I
I
also
think it works.
I also love the Goblin King's characterization as this like basically Jabba the Hutt style creature
Hmm.
who's just like overly overly like gluttonish and brutish and to the point where he's gorged himself so much that he's just sort of lost the power of speech that all the other goblins have. It's actually really fun
Mm.
for like the 30 seconds that he's on screen, and that's kind of where the problems begin.
Sure. I will say one more thing on that last subject before we
Yeah,
move on. I think given how outlandish the concepts are in this story, and they are pretty wacky,
yeah,
as I say, it fits totally in line though, because if you're going to try and get away with um such high concepts and strange concepts as they do here, it's going to be in a show like Doctor Who, and it's really
yeah,
great to see RTD taking advantage of that.
yeah, and at the very least, you can't say that a goblin's inclusion in this is more nonsensical than, say, the moon being an egg, or
Yeah.
all of the trees on planet Earth spontaneously deciding to sprout in order to save the Earth from a solar flare. A thing that they don't even try and justify in the science in that episode at all. They just say, "Oh, trees are sentient. Move on."
Or having, a group of creatures called the Daemons from the planet Deimos. I mean,
Yeah, or
yeah,
Satan existing.
yeah. I mean, and we've said this before that Doctor Who is one of the shows throughout its whole history that, to an extent, you can do basically anything. So
Yeah,
I frankly don't want to hear from people saying that, oh,
no.
weird flying goblins that use ropes of science, that's not realistic. I'm like, I'm sorry, what show have you been watching?
Yeah, no, and I dare say that I imagine that public opinion on that is going to sort of when this episode is a time to sit and not be as new, people will look back at the goblins and go, "Oh,
Yeah, I think it'll grow
it's
on people.
just going to be another part of." Even if it doesn't, it's just going to be like another part of the show that people have to deal with.
Yeah, it's not. This is not like a ridiculous canon breaking thing, right? This
No,
fits perfectly in line. If you have an episode like the Shakespeare Code where witches use words almost as like an alternative to mathematics, you can deal with rope science, okay?
yeah.
Like
Let's get
yeah,
into the aspects of the goblins that don't work as well.
sure.
Oh, you first.
Oh right, sorry. No, I was waiting for you. I thought you because
Well, my
I
main
don't
my
I don't have
main
a lot of
issue
issues, but we'll
Me neither, but my main thing is like basically right at the end of the story, so it doesn't make sense to start with that. So over to you.
um I don't. I mean, I don't think there's heaps like maybe the fact that the goblins just disappear
That was it.
in
That
the
was my
end.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think for me, I just maybe wanted a bit more explanation of exactly how their science works.
I just wanted
Um,
like an explanation of the disappearance. We don't even get anything like that. Um,
yeah, yeah, it was
I don't know.
weird.
Yeah. Well, it's also like I don't have a problem with the time travel in the first place because the Doctor says they're not time travelers; they just manipulate
They're time
time as it's
surfers.
happening. Yeah, time surfers. Yeah, yeah. And I was
Yeah,
happy enough with the like it's not given in the episode, but my headcanon explanation is that the pure amount of coincidence surrounding the Doctor and Ruby in that moment gave them enough time surfing properties to go back
yeah,
when they
for
otherwise
sure.
wouldn't have been. That was fine by me.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think that the disappearance at the end, I think it did need like an explanation because I was sitting there thinking,
mm.
how are they going to explain this away? A massive wooden flying ship on a church, but then it just vanishes. I'm like, oh, okay. Are we gonna find out what happened there? Where did it
Yeah, and
go? Why did it disappear in the first place? What is it about the Goblin King being punctured that caused goblin magic to stop?
yeah, I mean, and you could argue like because Ruby basically just falls from the disappearing ship, and theoretically that could make sense if the goblins are like from another dimension and they
Hmm.
don't have the exact same sort of physical properties that we do, but then they don't explain that really. The goblin gets pretty violently impaled, and there's not really any like concrete resolution to that, and
Hmm.
it just seems like a little too mysterious in an episode that's already bringing up a lot of mysteries. And even if this is a case of RTD sort of playing for the long haul, as I think a lot of
Maybe.
elements in this episode are, it still doesn't help the episode itself.
No. I
It
mean, if we see a villain in another episode in the future disappear in a similar fashion, then I'll be like, okay, it was there for intrigue and not like an unexplained thing where RTD was going, what do I do? What do I do? And they vanish. Okay, whew, saved it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, any other aspects of the goblins that you have a problem with?
I think it was just they seemed a bit half baked to me. Like for me, my main thing was like they steal one baby at a time,
Mm.
and they're all being like, "Oh, we're gonna eat, we're gonna enjoy a big meal," and then I'm seeing watching the scene. It's like, well, it kind of looks like it's just the Goblin King that gets to eat here, and I'm
Yeah,
I'm okay with like that. If all you other goblins are just incredibly excited to watch your king eat something, fine. But your dialogue indicates that you're all excited to get a bit of a baby morsel, and that thing doesn't even look like it'll satisfy even the Goblin King's
yeah,
right.
yeah, it is a little bit strange. I think given how little time, certainly screen time, the goblins have, the characterizations are done pretty well, and in a way that's kind of why the song has to be there. It just gives a really
Yeah,
strong sense of who these people are.
with Janice
But
Goblin.
yeah, with Janice Goblin. But as you say, sort of overall, you sort of want their lore, I suppose, to be incorporated a little more smoothly in the narrative, because like there's nothing in it I think that really ruins the episode. Solving
No,
these
no, no.
mysteries don't. They're not a core part of the emotional uh sort of elements that are trying to be explored here. But um, you just sit there thinking, man, I just want a bit more explanation here. It's
Yeah,
just
that's all it is.
a little bit too mysterious, even for Doctor Who standards. Um, which is weird because the other parts of the um sort of the lore behind the goblins, as wacky as they are, the Doctor explains them in considerable detail. So you wonder
Yeah.
why wasn't that expanded upon?
Well,
It's but
it's also just like a
yeah,
massive departure from how the goblins are characterized because their whole thing is like they're
mm,
very very low tech, um, and they mainly use wooden ropes and they can surf time by creating coincidence. But like the incident that defeats them seems like very high tech. Something like teleporting can happen magically, obviously,
mm,
but I would expect that if it were to, it would be as a result of a coincidence, not the Doctor doing something to them.
Yeah, I mean, well, I wonder if it even would have could have worked if the Doctor, I don't know, could have opened up a rift in the space-time continuum and just sent them, like, saved Ruby and sent them on their merry way. But
Maybe. My
instead,
only my
hmm,
only headcanon explanation for the disappearance in that case is, wow, the church's spire just happened to pierce the Goblin King. What a coincidence! Oh
hmm,
no! And then they vanish. Like
yeah,
that's literally all I
too
can
much,
think.
too much coincidence, too much of um, yeah,
Hmm.
coincidence overload, really.
Yeah, the wolf can still drown in moonlight. That kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yes. Yeah. Um.
But again, if that was in the episode, I'd be like, okay, cool, explained away. But
Yeah. But they did. But they didn't do that. Like, yeah.
yeah,
It's just a little odd that it
hmm.
doesn't fit in as well. Because again, like one of the sort of joys with Doctor Who is that it's actually okay to explain things, even if they're very
Yeah,
wacky and strange. Like that's kind of the fun. It's giving these very bizarre concepts a scientific precedent, which is kind of enjoyable. So it's strange that that RTD didn't put that in there, especially given that the plot, like, it's not a terribly plot heavy story. So you wonder, could he have not found the space to include that, or it's just a bit of an unsolved mystery, and not quite in the good way.
yeah. And at the moment, I'm assuming that it's not something that is going to tie into future stories, so we
No,
do have
you
to
don't
see it
get
as
that
a negative
impression.
of the episode.
Like
Um,
I think that Mrs. Flood is going to show up. Yeah, I know that you're not, but this doesn't even
right.
have the same vibe that Mrs. Flood
No,
has.
like if the
Um,
Doctor had looked up and gone, "Huh, that's weird,"
hmm,
like that would have been a telegraph to the audience that, oh, okay, it's odd that the teleportation happened. Maybe we'll find out about that in the future. But to me,
yeah, but it didn't.
at the moment it reads too much like RTD wrote himself into a corner, so hastily got them out of the script as
Yeah,
fast as he possibly could,
yeah,
which is a
yeah,
shame because otherwise it's a very very strongly written episode with
yeah,
quite a lot of thought put into it. I like the musical numbers. I know some people don't, and that's largely up to personal preference. I don't think that the songs, like Goblin Song aside, the song that the Doctor and Ruby sing, I've seen a lot of people going, "Oh, they just did that because." And it's like, well, no, they needed a distraction. They decided to sing to create that distraction. It works
yeah.
perfectly
No,
fine,
it works in
and
terms of plot and characterization because it
yeah,
feeds off the goblins' bizarre enjoyment of their own singing,
yeah, and
and
I
it
especially enjoy the very very real thing that Ruby does, where she doesn't can't think of a rhyme, so just does a bit of gibberish.
yeah.
Like it's
I
very
was
very real.
I was surprised. I mean, the fact that maybe with the Doctor makes more sense, but the fact that they both come up with these lyrics so quickly, I almost thought that was almost unbelievable. But as you say, the fact that Ruby, had a bit of a moment where she almost fumbled the lyrics, that does track. Like that does make sense.
Yeah, and like
Um,
speaking as someone who does musical improvisation semi
hmm,
frequently, it is difficult, but you'd be surprised, especially when the words themselves are like very obvious rhymes for each other. You'd be surprised how simple it can be.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I mean, I'd agree with that.
Especially
Um,
for the Doctor, like that guy should
yeah,
have
that makes
no
sense.
problems doing
Yeah,
improvised singing.
yeah, that one makes sense. Also, Shruti Gatwa's got a really, really great singing voice.
Yeah, definitely.
Really, really great baritone.
It's great that the show likes to do that sometimes. Like Peter Capaldi's a skilled guitarist, so his
Yeah,
Doctor played a guitar every now and then.
yeah,
Shooty Gatwa's got a good singing voice. They give him a song to sing. David
yeah.
Tennant has a Scottish accent. They give him an episode where he can speak in his native Scottish for a little bit. Like it's just fun that they
Yeah,
can do that.
Patrick Troughton's got a recorder that he plays on occasion.
Yeah.
You know, um, or it even in a way reminds me of the scenes in the Peladon episodes where the Third Doctor sings a Venusian lullaby to calm Agador, the monster underneath the castle in the stories. So again, there's precedent for this. Like I
Mm.
mean, I look. It is very strange to have this random musical number appear in a sort of a sci-fi story, but again, if
Yeah.
you're gonna do that, you're gonna do it in Doctor Who.
And
You
at
couldn't,
Christmas.
yeah, like you couldn't realistically get away with that anywhere near as easily in many other stories. Maybe, at the Mos Eisley Cantina and Star Wars,
Mm.
but beyond that,
Well, yeah, but that's the other thing as well. Like the way that people are talking about it, you'd think that like the music it's the kind of thing like happens in a musical where the music just appears out of nowhere and the characters sing as if they're not, like in the style of Grease, where it's just everyone starts singing and they never acknowledge it. Like it's a very different situation. I don't understand like
yeah,
that side of
no,
things.
it fits because the goblins are clearly reveling in this really
Yeah,
horrifying moment.
yeah, and
With
that
this,
plays into the dichotomy of it as well, like this
for sure. I
gleeful
mean,
singing at eating a baby.
if you like, it makes at least as much sense to have a musical number in this scene as it does to have songs in the original Lord of the Rings and Hobbit books.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm reminded
Yeah.
of the I don't know if you've seen it. It's the Rankin Bass 1977 version of The Hobbit,
I
which I
have it.
used to watch a lot as a kid. I'm reminded of the songs in that. So
Okay.
the point is, this does make sense. Given how left of field this creative decision is, RTD is making it work remarkably well. Um,
Yes.
it doesn't hurt, certainly doesn't hurt the plot in any way, and really it does help. It helps characterization, helps the plot get along, and it also helps with the tone.
Mm.
Because it again, Doctor Who has always had a very strange tone.
Mm.
And I mean, granted, there haven't been full blown like jazzy musical numbers in it before, but strange musical elements. It's never been afraid of that, and I think this fits in pretty damn well with it. And it's also at least kind of interesting, just to really just sort of consider how dark that song is. I was a
Yeah.
little thrown when I first listened to it. It's like it's really groovy and up and kind of upbeat, but it's like, oh no, they're talking about eating a baby. That's really really disturbing.
Well, the other thing that's disturbing, and it's something that the episode glosses over for good reason, these goblins like to eat babies, and the Goblin King is very overweight. When you put those two pieces of the puzzle
Oh,
together, it's incredibly dark.
yeah, it's really like when you combine sort of the dark humor with the real like genuine darkness, it reminds me of stuff you'd find in Roald Dahl books,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which is kind of interesting. But yeah, like I think overall that scene works um, for the episode in for all those reasons, the tone, the plot, the characterizations, and I'm happy to see Doctor Who taking wild risks again. I mean, I don't know if these are the same people, but if you're going to complain about this, then why aren't people up in arms about the fact that the toy maker showed up and tried to kill a bunch of people in unit well, not tried, did kill a bunch of people in unit, to the Spice Girls? What are we really talking about here?
Yeah.
You know, if
I
if
don't see
you
the
can
difference. Yeah.
if you can enjoy, um, Here Come the Drums, then
And
I
Bravo
don't,
Rasputin.
yeah, then I don't really see an issue.
Well, it's just that your favorite protagonist is singing. That's all it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Um. So, is there any more to discuss with this episode? Because I think we've covered
I
most of
want
it.
to. This is just a small bit, but when the Doctor saves Davina McCall, now that makes sense because
Yeah.
Davina
Yeah.
McCall's an actual person, and it would be really weird if she just
Kill her.
got died by Christmas Star.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, how did the Doctor know that was going to happen? Was he there on the set one day? Did he travel through time and go there? Like, again, it's just one of these small elements in the plot
Well, I have to
that
assume
lacks a
that
bit of clarity.
he would have like jumped ahead a day or two and seen in the newspaper like either Davina McCall killed by Christmas tree or Davina McCall saved by mysterious stranger from falling Christmas tree, and then just jumped back to the previous day and saved her.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's possible. And as I say, like, it doesn't really hurt the story, I don't think, but it was just a moment of, like, I just want a little bit more clarification on that. Just a little bit. Because there is, I mean, as I say, I think the meta quality is largely what makes that scene work.
Yeah.
Because again, like, you can't kill off Davida McCall like that. What are you doing?
No.
But I just wanted a little bit more sort of in-universe explanation for it. Also, I should have mentioned this earlier. I really like the way this episode is directed.
Oh yeah.
God, I'm just give me a second. I'm gonna get this up. Um, it was directed by Mark Tonderai. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it's really good. There's sorry.
No, I was disagreeing.
Yeah, it there's a real care and a thought put into the way this is directed, which frankly is in quite a lot of contrast to the Tribunal era, where a lot of the camera work was basically, look how long these tracking shots can be, guys. There's more thought of it here. There are a lot of tracking shots, which is really great. It gives a real sense of momentum, but they have real thought to them. I love the bit right at the end where the camera sort of quickly pans in on Ruby's face, and that's great because it captures the sense of excitement and sort of awe that she undoubtedly is feeling at that moment. And it's just those little decisions, the little details that I think really elevate the direction in this episode. I honestly, I mean, I've praised Euros Lynn's work on the show, but this, in a way, seems even more exciting, which is great. And it's also partly because I think they're taking advantage of more of a a Disney budget and modern technology by having these long tracking shots, but also, and this goes back to the Christmas star almost death scene, when the tree falls, there's a really great shot where it looks like they've mounted a small camera on the side of the star, so you see it traveling down as almost from the perspective of the star as the tree falls. And I just thought that's so great. That's something that's new. We haven't seen that in Doctor Who before, and the fact that they're thinking outside the box is just really, really exciting. I'll be very interested to see. I'll be keeping an eye on the way these episodes are directed in the coming seasons. So yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
I think so. I'm just
Cool.
going over some of the notes here. I don't think there's anything we've
covered most of the important stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, one small thing. And again, doesn't ruin the plot. I just maybe wanted a little bit more explanation. But when Davina calls Ruby and asks, if she's been having any bad luck lately, I wasn't 100% sold on that scene. It's plausible enough to work, but like you wonder why.
Yeah, why would she connect it to Ruby?
Yeah, exactly. Why Ruby precisely, and not other people.
I agree. I think it's. I mean, she doesn't say that she hasn't asked other people about it, but my impression is that she was able to trace the string of bad luck back to when the studio lights fell over and almost crushed Ruby, which is a fair assessment to make. And then from there, she might have gone, "Oh, I'm speaking to Ruby on the phone anyway. But while I've got you here, like these things have been happening. Do you think that's strange?"
Yeah, I think as I say, it's plausible enough that she would reach out and ask Ruby this question, but I just wanted maybe a little bit more explanation because it seems a bit odd. I mean, maybe it's a meta commentary, maybe it's this element of coincidence, maybe that's what it's trying to say, but it just doesn't fit into the plot quite as well as I'd want it to. Like, don't get me wrong, you need that scene to keep the plot going, but I just feel that it wasn't maybe handled quite as precisely as it would have been. Yeah, I think that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
With that in mind, I am going to give The Church on Ruby Road an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, Yeah, I think I'm going to give it an 8 too. Even if it's the classic example of yes, maybe the sum is greater than the whole, but the pieces of the sum are really great, and even then it gets tied together well enough. Um, it's tied together almost as neatly as the Goblin
Yeah,
ship. So,
sure.
so yeah, I think generally works. I think 8 is fair.
Cool.
And especially given how sort of ambitious it's trying to be and what it needs to do, it's
Hmm.
doing that stuff pretty well.
Yep. Before we go, we did get a little teaser for Series 14. No, we're not going to
Mm.
call it Season 1. No one's going to call it Season 1.
Yeah,
It's
I don't think
Series
that's ever going to
14.
happen.
Um, but on top of that, let's just quickly recap all of the
Mm.
loose plot threads, not just from this episode, but from the 60th anniversary episodes as well.
Hmm.
Um, the Meeps boss still unexplored.
Hmm.
The Toymaker's legions are still on their way.
Hmm.
And presumably, we're going to find out more about Ruby's backstory and why her mum left her at the church.
Yeah,
Am I
or who
missing
her mum
anything?
is, you know.
Yeah, who mum is. Mrs. Flood, 50-50.
Hmm.
But putting her to one side for a moment, is there anything else that is yet to be explored?
Um, no, I don't think so. I think
Cool.
that's generally. Oh, and the master will almost
Oh
inevitably
yeah,
show
the
up
master.
again.
The master, yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if not all of these elements are resolved next season.
Oh,
I
yeah. I think no.
Yeah,
Again, RTD's playing it for the long haul. I think.
I think especially with the master, I think they're going to wait a few seasons to
Yeah.
reintroduce that character. Um,
Yeah.
but in terms of the stuff that we do have floating around, I mean, I think maybe the Toymaker's Legions are the first thing we'll tick off the list, just because
Yeah.
like that kind of like the powers of the Toymaker are like the closest to a fantasy kind of villain, and that
Yeah.
seems to be what they're going to be exploring next season. So that's probably what we're going to get. But either way, we did get, like I said, a brief teaser. We saw some of the coming guest stars. We saw a few of the coming locations. We know Mel's coming back,
Mm.
presumably towards the end of the season. I'm. We have a few months to wait. They said spring, which means autumn for us. So at the earliest March, I would be surprised if it's not late April at the earliest
Mm.
that the episodes begin airing.
Oh my god! I just remembered something. This is such a weird thing, and I can't remember where I saw it from. Whether it was
Yep.
a official thing that was released or it was in reference to an article, but I saw something on Facebook the other day that mentioned the songs that are in the jukebox in the new Doctor's TARDIS, and they include Tainted Love and Toxic. And I thought,
Oh,
is this the same jukebox that's in The End of the World?
maybe.
Again, that's just such a wild thought, but like, it wouldn't surprise me if it was. So that's another mystery they may clear up. That'll be interesting.
That one
Um,
I highly doubt. I think that's just an Easter egg.
yeah, it's still very funny.
They might just have had that old prop sitting around still and went, let's dust it off, pop it in the
Yeah, yeah.
TARDIS.
And again, I can't remember where it came from. I don't know whether it was from an official source or anything, but that just made me laugh because, like, oh yeah, those songs were in that episode. You know, I remember it. I saw it and I
Random.
clapped. You know, yeah, it's just
um,
funny.
but yes, looking into the future, this brings an end to our regular episodes for 2023.
Hmm.
Thanks to everyone for coming on this journey with us all year. We've seen Daleks, we've seen uh, carnivals, we've met new doctors, said goodbye to doctors. We've seen many multi-doctor adventures, and we've been the first to point out whenever the show has gotten political, the many, many times that it has. We will be back in the new year. I'm not exactly certain when yet. We'll figure that out between now and then. Um, but presumably, we'll have some episodes in the chamber before the new season begins,
Yeah.
and that will kick off with the Runaway Bride, the next episode in our revived era watch along, kicking
Hmm.
off from the end of Doomsday.
Hmm.
Um,
Sure.
and and bizarrely, based given what we've looked at in the past, the introduction of Donna Noble.
Yeah, man, that's gonna be a bit wild. So yeah, I think exciting stuff still to come with this show. It has been another really fun year. For which I thank the audience and also thank you once again, Cuff. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and here's to many more wacky antics on here on Two Who's Review.
Until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And what? You never heard a podcast wrap up before?
Jesus Christ.